How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com. Hey, welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
And we are in our respective hovels here. Me on the East Coast of North America, you on the West Coast of North America.
Yep.
Both experiencing some weather.
Yeah. I mean, it's warmer here, right? There's a little bit of snow on the hilltops, which is where it should be, but just a bit stormy. But you're right on the ocean. This is the trade, right? So
we're recording this during what is really being hyped up as like the worst storm to ever hit America ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it's big?
Yes, because it's big and tornadoes and like there's multiple fronts and multiple things happening. Up here in the East Coast, we're going to get rain and strong winds with hurricane watches.
Right.
So, if it was colder, it would be a nor'easter.
Right. It's just not.
And I guess it's still a nor'easter because
it's coming out of the northeast?
Yeah, nor'easter, typically you got the warm jet stream coming up from the southwest.
Yeah.
And you got the Arctic blast coming over the Great Lakes, and they kind of join up and turn into Snowmageddon. But it's no snow this time. Well, very little, I guess, but in where I am. But anyway, so we're hunkering down for a good show here, and thank God the propane tank is full and the generator's working.
Yeah. I stocked the wood in case we lose the electrical heat. Although heating on wood is pleasant,
But you know what though? If you lose power, what would be better than to pull out your battery powered phone or whatever, plug in a charger, and listen to some old .NET Rock shows? Well,
there you go.
What would be better? Okay, maybe drinking yourself silly might be better, but I can think of a couple other things.
You can do both.
That's true. That's true. Hey, David Fowler is here. We're going to be talking about .NET Aspire, but first, let's roll the crazy music for Better Know Framework.
Awesome. All right, man. What do you got?
This being show 1881, which is just unbelievable, isn't it?
Palindrome.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that the last day of 23 was
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, 1,
2, 3. Yes. Yeah.
2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. It's a little disturbing.
All right. So it's 1881.pwop.me, and that'll bring you to leftoversalad.com to some cartoon versions of personifications of your favorite programming languages. And it just made me crack up. The first one, Python, is a hipster smoking a cigar. He's got tattoos and holding a coffee cup.
As you do.
And he says, "My formatting is my syntax, boomer." No, he didn't say boomer, but I can just see that.
You can hear it.
Yeah. So I asked you both, David and Richard, to take a look and tell me your favorite ones. What's your favorite one, Richard?
Oh, well, C#, obviously. I have a daughter just like that.
Yeah, C# is, "I am nothing like my father."
Being
and she looks...
C and C++.
She looks...
off like your father.
Yeah. So the right above her is C, which is an old guy with a big gray beard and a balding head. "If you're not allocating memory, you're not living." And then C++ right below it is the same guy, same caption, except now he has Borg implants.
Right.
David, did you find one that tickled you?
I think Erlang is my favorite.
Yeah. Erlang is awesome.
Erlang's very manga, isn't it?
It is.
And it's this woman with a cane and skeletons behind her, and she's saying, "Destroy one of my processes and I will only grow stronger."
And that is a magic staff if I've ever seen one.
Absolutely. She's wearing like an amulet, and there's like mascara dripping from her eyes or whatever that is. I don't know.
Right.
Although Haskell is probably like peak.
Yeah.
That diagram is exactly what I think of Haskell programmers, like above everything is pure math. Everything is just like lambdas.
It is perfect.
Yeah. And then Go is this giant Google monster, with a Google t-shirt, just ripped, right? Bald head. And this little nerd sitting in front with big eyes. All right. Well, anyway.
Okay.
I thought that was fun. It was a good diversion.
Funny.
So, Richard, who's talking to us today?
Well, it turns out we haven't had Mr. Fowler on the show for a little while. Probably a little too long, actually. But he's been busy being a distinguished engineer and stuff. So we're not going to fuss too much on that.
He gets a get out of jail free card.
Well, and I went back and looked at some of the old shows and so forth. I'm like, but I found this great comment just by searching on his name, actually. And it's actually a comment. It's 7 years old. It's from August of 2016, episode 1335. And when we were talking to Matt Watson, who's the Stackify guy, about his experiences migrating to .NET Core, of which we blame David for extensively. And so Matthew DeCray made this comment, admittedly 7 years ago, where he said, having weathered the storm of .NET Core and its other names since Beta 8, I can completely understand the frustrations trying to follow all the decisions that have been made. I even gave up during the RC periods. Yeah, there were some bumpy times getting to V1. Holy man. However, the .NET standard versioning is much easier to understand if only you have the right resources. The trouble is, it seems that a large number of naming changes, that there are many official locations for documentation too. Remember to life before learn? None of which appear to be completed. I guess the documentation is in preview too. I did manage to find an analogy by David Fowler, and he provides a link to a GitHub doc that
he's nodding his head.
David did that puts in terms any C# should be able to understand with code. With this, it's clear to understand the PCL capabilities. You can target the right version based on your capabilities. It even describes the Xamarin libraries in these terms. As a result, it makes it easier to know whether you're making a library that can run on mobile, or at least in that sense, if it compiles, it can ship. And that's what delighted me about this find, right? Was it's like, oh, it's David Fowler. So he answered a question with code. Of course he did.
It's great.
And the code still runs. It's still up. It's still there. I mean, of course, the PCLs are gone. Let's not talk about that.
Thank God.
Thank God. But yeah, it was such a cool comment. And I probably should have read it years ago, because it was one of those great things about how do you explain stuff to people?
Yeah.
So Matthew, thank you so much for your comment. A copy of Music Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music Code By, write a comment on the website, .netrocks.com, or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and are reading the show, we'll send you a copy of Music Code By.
And you can follow us on Twitter if you want to, but the cool kids are hanging out on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot. You might get a mug.
Pretty sure you won't. Pretty sure.
You might. All right, so let's bring David Fowler back. He joined Microsoft, of course, as a developer on the ASP.NET team in 2008. Before that, he did 2 internships at Microsoft as a tester and developer. He's originally from Barbados and went to college in Florida, and you may have heard of a couple of things he's been interested in, like, Signal R, that little thing. Lots of other stuff, and now we're going to be talking to him about Aspire. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, y'all. Haven't seen you in a while. Haven't hung out for a bit.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, congratulations on the distinguished engineer thing. I don't even know if I know people know what that even means.
Yeah, I think it means a little bit of gray hair.
Yeah, you have been doing this for a while.
Tiny. It's weird when you go from being the youngest person on the team, being the intern, to like being there for a long time and only beginning to realize how long you've been there when new people join and they ask you questions and you're like, what? Like, huh? Isn't that just normal?
Yeah.
You guys want to hear old? I remember when .NET Aspire was a program designed to support the growth and development of developers who are passionate about .NET technology.
Oh my gosh.
Name reuse problems.
That never happens. What? That's not a thing.
So if you go to ChatGPT and ask, can you tell me about .NET Aspire? That's what comes out. Unless you ask it to go to the web and say, no. I'm talking about the Azure thing. the .NET framework thing.
Oh man, naming is super hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember even trying to name things like Signal R, Razor, Blazor. I mean, we got some pretty cool names. I will like Blazor's a really good name.
Yeah.
Yeah, finally.
Razor is as well.
Yeah, Razor, exactly.
It's not, I know, Microsoft rendering tech stack for SP3. Like that meme that we have at Microsoft for naming things poorly. Blazor and Razor brought that entire mold.
I mean, to be clear, it's not a meme just at Microsoft. That meme is all over.
It's a tech
Windows
industry meme.
Technology Foundation, otherwise known as WTF.
Oh man.
Yep.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's been a ride.
So it was at Ignite that you decided to roll this thing out. Couldn't wait for build, huh? You were ready.
Couldn't wait for build. That's right. Ignite.
Yeah.
What's insane about Aspire was the team had a lot of ideas rolling in our brains for like a couple of years now, right? So we did TIE in 2019. And TIE, if you hadn't seen it, it's still there on GitHub, .NET/TIE. And TIE was our first real attempt at trying to build a microservice tool developer experience for making it easier to develop these kinds of applications that were made up of multiple parts of your app. And the story of TIE is interesting because what ended up happening was 2019 was that year where Kubernetes was like, we had been ignoring it. Well, me personally had been like, you see it and it's important and it's a thing people are learning, but you put it in the back burner and you wait to see if you get more signal. And it kept getting stronger and stronger. Okay, this is the thing that people are using.
And this is TIE, TYE, TIE?
TYE, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
You know, I went researching .NET Aspire a little deeper from what I saw at Ignite. And the first thing that came to mind is, kind of like Azure Service Fabric, but, community driven. And
yeah, so
and we should correct one thing before Jeff Fritz actually reaches through the wire and strangles us all.
Yeah.
You announced it at .NET Conf, which happens to be the same week,
same time as Ignite.
Yeah. I was working at Ignite, although I did do a shift at .NET Conf, but it was at .NET Conf. So please, no car bombs. Like, come on, Jeff, calm down. Jeff is very angry right now.
and we were actually at Ignite like that same week. So we did the keynote, .NET Conf, we did talks, and then I did the 2 panels like about Aspire and stuff at Ignite in Seattle.
So you did talk about Aspire at Ignite while also having announced it at .NET Conf.
Correct.
Because that's not confusing at all.
Well,
it was tough.
.NET Conf is a community thing, right? That Microsoft gets behind. And, Ignite is obviously Microsoft's baby. But from what I remember, there were more people that were tuned in to .NET Conf than went to Ignite.
It was huge this year. Like it was insane this year. Just quite amazing, actually. Watching that conference grow from this super small thing that Javier kind of helped put together into what it is today. Insanely massive conference that people watch real time live. And it was a ton of fun, like making the keynote, recording it this time. Yeah. I remember last year the keynote was live.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Stressful.
Total panic. Total panic.
Stressful. Like the back-to-back rehearsals, making the keynote like work well.
Yeah. Well,
oh my gosh.
I know that you are no stranger to live keynote code on the fly demos that blow people's minds, like mine.
It's funny. Live coding to me is like the easy part.
I know, right? Yeah. All right. So let's just talk about .NET Aspire. What is it?
So TIE is the precursor project, right?
Yeah. So TIE is the precursor.
But in particular, how does it compare to Azure Service Fabric, which kind of walks on the same path? Yeah.
So what's funny is when we were building TIE, I felt like we were going to get feedback about Docker Compose and TIE. Service Fabric kind of surprised me, to be honest, and it shouldn't have, but it surprised me that people drew the comparison. But in hindsight, it made complete sense because Microsoft shipped an orchestrator.
Yep.
So during the great orchestration wars of 15 to 2019, right? There was Mesos from Apache. There was it was Mesos, Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, Service Fabric, right? There were these 4 big ones that people were all using, and There's one called Nomad from, I think, HashiCorp.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was kind of trying to see which one to win. And I'm not sure if you recall, but in Azure, there was a service called ACS.
Right.
Azure, I think it was the original Azure Container Service.
Yes.
And it supported multiple orchestrators. You could pick your own, and there was no winner at that point, right? You could pick an orchestrator, and bring your own containers, and then Kubernetes won.
Mm-hmm.
And Service Fabric is still very much used,
it's not like it went away.
in enterprises. Yes, it's still there, right?
Why do you think Kubernetes won?
Well, it's also really tied to Azure, isn't it? Service Fabric. I mean, it will run on-prem, or it will run on whatever cloud, but it really shines because it's using, Azure itself is using Service Fabric. But
it is. The core of Azure uses Service Fabric, for sure.
But Aspire is really more like a framework, isn't it? For the .NET framework that
super challenging.
Makes it easy to put these things together.
So
there's the difference.
We had this really hard time trying to figure out how to describe it succinctly. What is a single sentence that describes what Aspire is? Because it combines kind of 4 things together. And it is a framework, but it isn't a framework. So you don't use the Aspire framework. You use ASP.NET Core, right?
Yeah,
right.
One of the challenges was, we built this amazing web stack. We built this amazing tech over the last 8 years. And we have all these pieces that you can put together yourself in an application. But you kind of have to know how to do it. How do you wire up telemetry? How do you wire up Poly? How do you wire up health checks? All these things existed in the ecosystem, but putting it together into a package and having it be orchestrated end to end is the thing that Aspire did. So Aspire added orchestration for local development and gave you patterns in your application for that. What's funny is the tech isn't new. It's just we glued things together that were there already, right?
So I looked at the Aspire components.
Yeah.
And, they're all the components that I would use in my own .NET framework, except they have an Aspire in front of them. So obviously, Aspire.Azure Blob Service or whatever is Azure Blob Service, but it's got the glue to hook it into the rest of what Aspire does. Open telemetry, there's tons of them.
Open telemetry, configuration, DI, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's funny, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out if that's valuable. Is it valuable to have glue packages that are versioned consistently and that glue things together that you would always need in an application? And we went back and forth with the Azure SDK team. Should we put this in the SDK? Should we have a separate component? What's the value in having a separate thing and a glue package? But I think based on what we've seen feedback-wise so far, people love the convenience. You basically grab this package and you call a method and it wires up 4 or 5 things that you would have had to do by hand. And I think in isolation, it looks simple. Yeah, I did it once, this one time here for this one component. But when it's 4 or 5, Redis and blobs and all these, and you have distributed tracing on, config working, DI working.
And it also configures the pipeline in the right order, right?
That's right.
That's the biggest problem when you have these things. It's oh, geez, where does this go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yep. And some of this actually came out of watching. There were some internal teams building these higher level libraries on top of lower level SDKs. And we asked them, why are you not using the SDK as is? And they were well, if you're building an at-scale cloud service, turns out these default config settings made to work in any environment don't work well for our services. So we went, could we take what you've learned from kind of building, the Teams backend or the Bing backend and package it into a way that just works for our customers by default? So Aspire is trying to take knowledge from teams at Microsoft building high-scale services and making it available for third party as well, devs as well.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to it. And but at the end of the day, it's about that configuration, isn't it? It's about the distributed builder, I guess. Instead of the regular old app builder you do in ASP.NET, you use the Aspire builder, and then you can just add Redis, add this, add that, wherever. Yep. And it just figures out how to put that pipeline together.
Correct. One of the first things we did was we took the eShop example. And
Oh
eShop
no.
on containers was one of like, it's funny. The backstory for eShop is kind of incredible. One of our product managers, I want to say like 7 years ago, said we need to have this sample and a book with it. And they kind of like on their own built this thing, right? Got vendors, built this mega sample out. It's super popular, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it never goes away.
It never goes. It never goes. It's super popular. So we were like, okay,
That's one way to say it.
That's why I said, "Oh no!" It's like, really? Are we still talking about eShop?
I heard you. Oh well, eShop got a massive revamp in .NET 8. So the engineering team took over eShop. So now the ASP.NET Core team owns eShop. There's a new a new repo that is kind of like successor to the older one, eShop on containers. And it's Aspire based.
A Blazor front end, right?
It's all .NET 8, Blazor front end. Like it's all modern, super modern. It has a beautiful photo. Like the diagram is like amazing. And it's all Aspire based. And part of the proof, we were like, okay, we need to be able to take eShop, which is built on Docker Compose and had a lot of manual deployment scripts for deploying to different parts of Azure, like AKS, ACA, etc. And we said, okay, our test is we need to be able to take at a minimum a thing like eShop and Aspirify it, and then like be able to deploy it to Azure and have it just work, right? Azure or Kubernetes, and have it just work without too much changes, right? Mm-hmm. The Docker Compose situation for Aspire, and those who don't know, Docker Compose is a way to compose a multi-process application locally, but you have to put everything in containers first.
Yeah.
One of the big pain points in building Docker files for .NET projects is you have to copy every single project reference into the container for a container build.
Wow.
So if you were to look at the Docker files for eShop, they're like 100 lines long, copying CS projects.
Jeez. Because
.NET has solutions and project references, and you end up having to copy the transitive closure of all these dependencies just to build containers, right? So imagine, I've seen feedback, people saying, why would I use Aspire if I have Compose? Right. And I think the what ends up happening there is if you figured out the secret sauce to make it all work, and you have like massaged your Compose files to a point where
if you're Mark Rendell.
Yeah. If you somehow figured it out, then maybe you're happy with what you have. But the moment you want to change, add, move things around, it gets hard again, right?
Right. Yeah. Wait for V2.
Yeah, exactly. So when we moved eShop to Aspire, when we got enough of Aspire working to move eShop to it, it was like, holy crap. Like we move, and I think there were like 4 or 5 Compose files and different environments, because it's YAML. There's no code. You can't write if statements. You're bound by like you basically end up having n different files for n different configurations, right? Where in the Aspire world, we give you C#, and you can write an if statement and you can declare variables. So like you end up in this place where I can just write code to say if I'm in development, do X, otherwise do Y. Right?
Yeah.
Super nice.
Super nice. .NET, Visual Studio .NET templates.
Yeah.
Is that where we would start? Like, I know you need Docker for desktop, but I think it requires currently the preview version of Visual Studio, right?
Yeah. So there is, it's funny. This was one of the big things when we were like debating where things would land first. You can use Aspire from the command line or VS Code just fine.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Big thing big VS does for you is when you hit F5, it'll auto attach to all your processes and you can debug. And that's one of the big things people asked for when we did TIE 3 or 4 years ago. It was, I want to be able to debug a microservice and I want to hit F5 and I want it to launch under the debugger all of my processes so I can step across the end-to-end tracing, right? The end-to-end.
So typically you do that with the solution properties, right? Run multiple projects at the same time. So you don't have to do that?
Correct. You don't have to do it.
Ooh.
So your Aspire app, it just launches like end projects, containers, processes, and it will attach. And you can just step into it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
more of that, please.
It's super nice. Yeah. we built this local orchestrator. And I think this is where the Service Fabric confusion comes in, because it has a very similar thing where Service Fabric has a local orchestrator, but that thing is the real orchestrator. When you deploy to like your environment on-prem or to Azure, you are running that orchestrator.
Yeah, Service Fabric is really, it includes the platform, the platform as a service, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It's the platform, right? Like it really is like you are running Service Fabric. It is an all-in-one, like give me the local dev orchestrator. And then when you publish, you get that same experience like in the cloud or wherever else.
So Aspire
is different. It differs there.
Yeah, it's lightweight, it's community driven.
Yeah.
Did we mention that?
So open source, it is this lightweight orchestrator. And actually, details wise, it's actually built on the Kubernetes pattern locally. But then when you publish, we create this intermediate format, or an IL if you must. This manifest is declarative, and it kind of describes all of the resources used to build the application locally. And then
it's not YAML, is it?
It's definitely in JSON.
Thank you.
But this was one of the big things we were trying to figure out. How do you go from local development to production?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Do you take the orchestrator everywhere you go? So we said, no, that isn't what we're going to do. We're going to spit out this manifest that kind of describes in this declarative format all the resources and all the types, the Redises, all the caches, environment variables. And then it's up to a separate tool to glean from that manifest and turn it into concrete resources. So when you use the Azure Developer CLI, you say ACD up, it actually tells Aspire, give me your manifest. And then it'll convert that manifest into Bicep, which is the infrastructure as code language for Azure.
Yeah, it's for ARM, for Azure Resource Manager.
Exactly, for ARM. Exactly. Yeah. It's nicer ARM than ARM JSON.
Yes, but it's writing ARM under the hood for you, just so you know. Like, there's no voodoo here.
It is, but there's no magic.
But if you've gotten tired of staring at JSON, like Bicep is more languagey.
Correct.
I'm more tired of staring at YAML.
Honestly, one of the big things that we were trying to have as a selling point for Aspire was like, are you tired of looking at YAML? Do your eyes glaze over?
Hanselman must have been involved in that because he hates it just as much as I do.
Honestly, like when you enter the cloud native space, one of the big things I think people just accept is like there is YAML and config everywhere. You are gluing bits together by editing config files and passing in IP addresses and hosts and ports, trying to figure out how the things all like do this, right? Glue together.
Now, GitHub told me again, YAML's my number 2 language. And I'm like, stab me.
Oh my gosh.
But I glue a lot of stuff together. Like, that's just reality for me.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the big things Aspire will enable is building an ecosystem of packages that hide some of the YAML like goop.
It's not that the YAML isn't there, is that you didn't have to type it.
Yes, thank God for that.
That's the important part.
You call add Redis, and you can give IntelliSense for configuring the port, configuring like the UI for Redis, and you can build like you can actually compose things, right? I think one of the big things that Pulumi did, like that Pulumi figured out, which they knew, right? With code, you can build abstractions. And packages and modules, and you can abstract end things by having like one interface that does end things under the covers. The YAML based config models don't let you do that. You are stuck with string replacements. You are like, how do I have let's say you want to have a base platform for your team. So my team is going to use Grafana and Loki and you name the top 5 CNCF things, right? How do you give all of your team a template that says you guys should use this base template for all of your services? Like, it's difficult, right?
I wonder what the cartoon representation of YAML would be. Let's just think about that for a second.
Something to do with like it's duplication. So it's something to do with duplicating stuff everywhere.
Maybe like Lucille Ball trying to sort the strawberries as they come off the or the chocolates, conveyor belt.
Yeah. So that was one of our big drivers. Like, could we and it was a big discussion on the team. Like, what do we use as this file format?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a solution? Like, do we try to change the solution file?
Mm.
Because the solution is kind of like the Uber project for multiple projects.
Mm-hmm.
But we wanted something code based. It was like you put together your application by saying, give me an application, let me add projects to it, containers to it, executables to it. And that gives you enough of a primitive for others to kind of say, my company is going to use my platform. I can do builder.add my company's platform. Composition, right? Things we learned, 50 years ago from programming languages that config files don't give you.
Right.
No, I'm ranting.
Yeah, I know. It's so great that we're on the same team. Hey, guys, let's just take a break real quick for these very important messages, and we'll be right back. And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's my friend Richard Campbell.
Yes, sir.
Out there with the beavers and the otters and the bears.
Mostly otters these days.
And we're talking to David Fowler from Microsoft about .NET Aspire and how absolutely freaking cool it is and how much I love JSON and I hate YAML. Did I say that?
It also strikes me that this might be the thing that gets a .NET developer that hasn't really gotten into the microservices container space yet and said, am I ready now? Because it's pretty intimidating. This project works. You want me to do what to it?
Exactly.
So I just wonder, coming from an existing application that just hasn't been broken down in that way at all. It's just a happy ball of mud.
Great question. How do we do that?
Yeah.
Can Aspire help me get started?
It can. One of the big things we attempted to do was Aspire has kind of these four main pieces like orchestration, components, telemetry. You can kind of pull in what you want to pull in for your project. So you can adopt at your own pace. One of the big things we learned, and personally that I learned doing .NET Core in the first place, was people love migration when they can opt into doing it incrementally.
Right. No dead drops, please. We just had a great show with Jimmy Bogart where he talked about migrating a framework app over to Core, or to starting. Went to 6 and then up from there, and just that we reverse proxy this thing so you can just replace one piece at a time. It's always very one smartly app. It's just on two platforms, and but no dead drops, except that one day there's nothing left running in framework anymore. Except authentication. That was last. It's
off is the hard part. Off in session, like super hard.
Off in session, without a doubt.
But so that was one of our main driving factors. Like, you add the Aspire orchestrator to your main solution, and you just get Aspire. You launch that project. It'll launch your big application, your big ball of mud. Yeah. And you get the dashboard, you get telemetry. Like, you can kind of ease your way into getting these benefits and features. You get container publish, you get deploying to different environments.
You watch the percentage of mud go down every day.
That's the hope, right?
Until it's 0.
We have big aspirations. I'll tell you, while we were doing the Aspire prototype, I was trying to project like a couple of years out what this could look like in the long run. And there were ideas floating around and just about being able to build your app as a monolith. The holy grail, right? You to build your app, you think about app components, you think about parts of your app. And I think Blazor is the first incantation of seeing this for a client framework.
Yes.
I mean, and Next.js and SvelteKit and those things. Let me carve off a set of my app as a component and let me name it. And then I'm going to turn that universe into a deployable asset. So it doesn't matter if I start as one project or like 5 projects. I can isolate my code and I can isolate my apps into different deployable units.
Yes.
And I feel as though Aspire is kind of inching in that direction. We started off with this very basic, like, I can add a project here, I can add a container here. You could imagine that being like, let me add a chunk of code. And that chunk of code becomes its own deployable unit, right? So I feel like that is the way to get people into a mode where I can build my application without feeling guilty that I did it wrong, right? And I can shift and change and refactor like as I go, as I grow, right? Because who would want to start with microservices? Like, when you don't have the complexity Like it's asking for pain before you have that desire, right? And if you can have someone be productive when they start off, and then as they scale up, they don't have to rewrite everything from scratch. Like I think that is the holy grail we've been looking for the last, like, I don't know, count how many years we've been doing software, right?
Many years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Good stuff. It's good stuff. So we were talking about the open sourciness of Aspire. So in terms of those community contributions, what are some of the areas in .NET Aspire that could benefit the most from open source development?
So one of the big parts of Aspire that we knew would be, I won't say controversial, it was a point of discussion for the team itself, was components. Components are curated. One of the big things we were trying to learn from watching other players in the space, Spring Boot being the Java equivalent, probably the biggest well-known thing in the cloud native space for Java devs is Spring Boot, right?
Right.
One of the things they have is this thing called Spring Cloud, which is essentially a set of components that are curated. So when you are looking for something like a Redis or a database driver or any client library for any open source piece of software, they had an answer, right? And it wasn't that we didn't have an answer. It was that they showed you this list that had all the answers. So we were like, maybe there's something to this list. Let's try to do a curation thing where all the Aspire components are basically this first class list that we curate. And third parties can build their own. But if you want to be in the curated list, you have to be a verified Aspire component. So you have to come through us, right? That was
You have to pay your $8 a month and get that badge.
It's free. But you have to pass. You have to. We don't really have a really well-defined council or review process as yet. But the intent is like if you are in the Aspire component list, you can be sure like the quality is high. It has these minimum features by default, et cetera, right? So it is a NuGet package, but it's one where there's like more checks and there's more things in place and there's more things that we did to make sure it passes some min bar of feature work, right?
Yeah.
The community, as soon as we went open source, I could not believe how fast the community added more components. Like we had in the very beginning, SQL Server, obviously, like that's we ship SQL Server, Postgres, Redis, and the community just like threw out a ton of amazing things. And the PRs were of such high quality, it was incredible. We got MySQL from the MySQL author for .NET.
Cosmos.
We got Kafka PR. We got Cosmos. It was just like
MongoDB.
So MongoDB, like, and we didn't even have a document on how to write components. People just figured out how to write.
Figured it out.
But so normally
you weren't even there yet.
Normally I've worked on open source for a long time, and the maturity in the pull requests that we got for Aspire were shocking, because these weren't small bug fixes. These weren't like, changing the semicolon here or cleaning up comments. This was, here's a whole new feature that works end to end.
Right.
It blew me away.
You mentioned open telemetry.
Yeah.
So that requires some knowledge of how to use open telemetry, obviously.
Yeah.
But how does that work together with Aspire?
So one of the things we get to do since it was 2023 and now we're in 2024, one of the benefits of coming this late to like these spaces are things become more standard.
Right.
So we don't have to invent our own protocol. We don't have to invent our own tools. We don't have to invent our own libraries. Turns out over the last 5 or so years, open telemetry has been pretty much being standardized in the industry. So the benefit of that is in Aspire, we said, how do we get telemetry by default? One of the things we realized was, if you think about the F5 experience for a single project, the debugger in VS and like how amazing it is and the experience you get when you step through, can see variables. What is that experience for distributed systems, right? And James King, who did JSON.NET, he went away for 1 week, right? And he built this trace UI in the dashboard. And the first demo we had where we showed someone, here's kind of our fake eShop, and here's the end-to-end trace. Like, people just sat there because on F5, you had this default end-to-end trace that went through service A, service B, and a database call. And it was just on by default.
Wow.
And all the work we had been doing with open telemetry, with like our libraries, with the EF team, with all these open source partners, they had all this stuff like in the tools. It was just really hard to see without wiring up 10 different containers and YAML. And now on your default Aspire F5, it's just there. Right? Wow. It's as though we turned the light on. Someone said, we did all this work and it was invisible. And now with this one dashboard view, all the work we did over the last 5 years is like there in your face.
Is there a danger in not knowing how these things work under the hood and just running the default application, the projects, and just publishing it?
Absolutely. So one of the first Reddit threads on the Aspire stuff when it first came out, you could see the tug of war developers had where this is amazing. It'll make me so productive. Where some other people were like, oh, this is an abstraction layer.
What's going on in there?
I need to know what's happening. I think it's kind of like anything else. Developers will have to know certain things. And I think part of my job and our job as designers of a framework is to hide stuff, but don't make it obscure.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things we do is when you create an Aspire project, the reason open telemetry works is because there's code in your app that says add open telemetry. Like, it's there. We didn't hide it from you. It's not magic.
Right.
It's right there configured with a comment, and it says add the OTLP exporter, which just says if you have an environment variable, call this thing, like it's passed in from the Aspire host, and it works. What I've learned over the years is if developers can draw lines from code to how things work in their brain, then it becomes less magic and more, I get how that works. I get how this goes there, how that gets sent here, et cetera, et cetera.
It might be helpful to have an AI that could explain things when you don't understand what's going on.
If only we had that.
Yeah, if only there was an AI that was...
That would be strange. That's not a real thing. You guys are crazy.
Yeah, but okay, I get how to do it and it works, but what's going on here? Why does it work, right?
I love that. Right now, I think we're at the phase of what's funny is this discussion would have been super strange if we had it like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It would have been a joke, right? It would have been like,
what sort of like AI? What problem are you trying to solve here? Like, what are you talking about?
Right. And now we're here in 2024 saying that statement, and it is reasonable. It's totally. Like, I could totally see the AI describing how this works under the covers, how like when you create a container and a process, how the networking works between them, etc. Yeah.
Look at my app and draw me a map. Right?
That's not crazy.
No, it's not crazy.
No. Yeah, we are inching towards that. It's an ability to see these pieces. But part of what you're doing here is you're creating better delineations between pieces of functionality, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's always been the problem, is it's very hard to tell what is one piece live and another piece live and how do they talk to each other. Like, that whole manifest part has never been well described.
Yeah.
You really have to read it and dig at it and then watch it running. Like, it takes a while to have confidence that this is what this actually means.
I've been programming believe it or not, a Windows Forms app in the last month for a client.
Oh, man.
It's all like scientific, technical, analysis kind of stuff. And this guy who hired me knows VB, knows how to read VB, but he didn't understand link. And so I had some link statements in there that were pretty complex. And he's like, what the heck is that? And so I just took the link statement, pasted into GPT and says, hey, can you explode this into for loops for me and comment it? And it did. And I was like, here, this is what it's doing. And I tried it, and it got me the same result. And so I just left it in the code as commented.
Right.
As a way for somebody who doesn't understand how to read link statements.
That's a great idea.
It's very, very cool. Very powerful stuff. Or here's another thing that you can do. The other way, you have this convoluted for loop that somebody's written, and you say, hey, can you optimize this code for me? And it will.
Will it write a link statement?
I will tell you.
It'll write link statements. It'll use parallel computing. Like, it's pretty freaking amazing.
This is a space that there is active interest on our team looking at, like,
No kidding.
how do we take advantage of the AI to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it really does begin to feel like the things that you wanted to do before in your brain are now possible. Like, what if we could have Stephen Tobe in a box?
Right.
Yeah.
What if I could just have him on my shoulder when I'm coding? Like, the Tobe model. And
there's
it's
a more optimal way to do that, Let me just optimize that for you.
Start with the system prompt. You are Stephen Taub. How would you do this?
Exactly. That's what you want. Yeah. Yep.
But we digress a little bit.
This is a conversation we had with Mads Torgerson back in the day, where I said, like, okay, you're 12 versions of C# in, like, what? And pretty much the code I wrote in C# 3 still runs just fine. So why would I use the new features? He says, we're really going to have to focus on the tooling to help drive you towards the new language constructs. So it is that, how do you hint, how do you present a given chunk of code that runs and say, there's a terser way or a cleaner way or a faster way to do that.
Yeah. It's tricky. Like, languages, the changes I think personally have been quite amazing. And I love how C# makes things that were arduous and, like, more verbose, less verbose, and, like, succinct. I've seen a lot of teeth gnashing about being able to do things in a very similar way with different syntax. The way I see it is, the syntax gets cleaner over time, right? I can do things more expressively, and easier, but it can be seen also as, like, you've added more ways to do the same thing, right? Yeah. And I really think that's the thing we see as, like, an even split. Like, I'll paste something on Twitter and on X, and people will be like, what is this new syntax? I don't understand it. And I'm like, this is super nice to have.
I love the simplification.
That's how I think we see it. Like,
implicit usings.
We simplify the syntax.
Global usings.
Collection expressions. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
So I want to get back to something that Richard brought up before the break, which was taking an existing .NET application and what did you say? Aspirifying it?
Aspirifying it.
Yeah. So what challenges do you foresee in adopting .NET Aspire in existing projects, and how can you address them? How can we address them?
So the biggest roadblock thus far has been the fact that the Aspire has been targeting .NET 8 and up. So when we started off, we were like, let's just say it's .NET 8, and immediately, people use the product and they want to use it because I think once you figure out how easy it is to use and how you can opt in to different parts of it incrementally, then I think people begin to say, okay, this isn't such a big hammer. I don't have to change all my stuff. I can add it to all of my stuff. Like, I'm not worried, right? We will have to see what ends up happening there. I think that's one of the big blockers today. Like, you have to be on .NET 8 for it to work.
Right. So it's really great for greenfield applications, but for
or if you're gonna upgrade to 8, then you'll have Aspire support in your apps, right?
But most people are still on earlier versions of .NET. Let's face it.
Yeah. But if they're on 5, then they're unsupported. If they're on 6, they are supported.
Right.
But I mean, I know people are spread across the spectrum. We see, like, that feedback sometimes. So
if you still have a startup.cs in your project, you
all over the place.
You might be a redneck.
Oh my gosh. Do you want to hear a crazy thing? So when we shipped .NET 1, Core 1.0, right? We had gotten rid of the Project JSON, my beloved Project JSON that we killed. And there was a team inside Microsoft who had deployed an app on DNX. And the engineer that had deployed it left. And this engineer, the engineer that took over, pinged me. I was like, can I please get some support? I don't know how to move this thing. I don't know what to do with it. We built a tool to help migrate. So like, that's what he did over time. But like, something broke. And then he was like, I can't find the docs anymore because the docs are now for like the CS proj, and the JSON file is like gone. And it was, those were tough times.
Yeah. Right.
Crazy.
Where was Bing AI?
Yeah.
Huh? Let's talk about the roadmap for .NET Aspire and any upcoming features or integrations that you think are particularly exciting.
Yeah, so yesterday, let's see, we came back from vacation. We shipped Preview 2 just before the break in for winter, before we all left for holidays. What's funny about that one, we a set of us went on vacation, and we were trying to ship like days before going on break. This is a bad idea. Do not ship software days before you go on a break.
You are going to wreck your holiday. Like you're just asking for it.
You're asking for trouble.
So it took us a couple more days to get it out. So some of us were like, every night I was like watching the chats, trying to see if we were like any closer. We got it out the door. Preview 2 is what I thought Preview 1 should have been. Had we had more time, Preview 2 is like, yeah, I can try it now. And we took all of the top feedback and we addressed a bunch of issues. So people were asking, how would I orchestrate an application where I have multiple repositories, right, that have my source code? What do I do, right? And their options are like, I can clone them all locally and orchestrate that way. I can put it in a container. So we basically give you the options now to do all the things. You can reference projects not in your solution. You can reference containers. You can reference a process, and they all work the same way. That was one of the big things we had to solve, because everyone saw it and thought, do I have to put everything in one solution? And then to fight that, we have to have enough features so you can experiment with how you lay out your source code, how you lay out your projects, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
I imagine you see a lot of variations on that, like more than any given person.
Yeah.
Just because you guys have such a broad view of the different ways that the studio gets used.
Correct. And the hardest part, if you look at the Aspire docs, it says that the stack is opinionated. The team struggles. Like, we struggle with having strong opinions because we are built in to be framework designers, and we basically build pluggable systems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So you have this dynamic between being inclusive, lots of people can use this the way they want to, and opinionated, so it's not trying to be everything.
Everything. Exactly.
And so it's really nothing.
Exactly. You got it.
Another way to say opinionated is convention over configuration, which last time I looked was a really good idea.
It is. I think some of the Aspire things we said no to early on may come back in the future, and people may ask for things like, there are a lot of requests, and I shouldn't be surprised. There are a lot of requests to run the orchestrator like locally on-prem. People want to replace their local on-prem deployments with IIS and I guess a Windows service with Aspire. And we had no intention, like zero intention of having this thing live past development, right? So the idea is
not a runtime.
F5 locally. It's not a runtime, exactly. You F5 locally and you can debug and see the dashboard. But then when you publish, you are targeting something. You target Kubernetes, you target Azure, you target Amazon's cloud. Like you run locally and you target a cloud environment.
To
right?
a space, yeah.
To a space. There's a lot of feedback from people, and I think the feeling is, you can help me make my app more modern if you give me a way to kind of like take the Aspire experience, put it onto my local on-prem environment, and then I can go to the cloud.
Right.
So that's an interesting like thing that I think came up that we didn't foresee. Like, I did not think that was going to be a thing.
Yeah. Do you want to go down the runtime path? Because man, that adds a lot of weight.
Yeah. Just use Kubernetes. Like, honestly, it might just be, if you're on a local machine and you want orchestration, use Kubernetes.
Yeah, let
and
Kubernetes
we can
do its thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, you guys
we
just
don't want to
output
compete
it
with Kubernetes. Exactly. Exactly. You got it.
We already had too many as it is, right? And Kubernetes now has that natural monopoly weight that the ecosystem's grown around it. It has Helm and all these other tools that make our lives easier.
And it runs everywhere.
Yeah, and everything runs it. So
every nautical metaphor you can possibly think of.
the same way you made us write less YAML, you can make us configure less Kubernetes.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to do. So we have this. So on the roadmap is we are targeting Azure container apps in the Azure space for V1. People ask for app service. People ask for
Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS.
Yeah.
AKS was on the map. It might still be on the map, but Azure Container Apps is the primary scenario for V1. Now we have community. One of our community members. Remember, I mentioned high quality contributions. This contributor built a manifest to Kubernetes experience. Incredible.
Wow.
It's called Aspirate. The name is
Aspirate.
Yeah. And it has an 8 in the name, so it's Aspire 8.
Oh, I was all very close to Respirate, which is it's still breathing. It's still breathing.
It is very close to Respirate. But it's super cool. I can take my Aspire app and say, give me a Kubernetes, and it spits out all of the stuff. And it's a lot of stuff. All the manifests, all the YAML, it does all the things.
How about gRPC Web, speaking of James King?
Ooh. Yeah, so there's first class support for gRPC service discovery in Aspire. One of the things we aim to not do is recreate anything that we already have.
Yep.
So it's ASP.NET Core, it's gRPC, and we weave our way into those subsystems via how they're extended.
Yeah, that's great.
It really should feel like I have my app, I added Aspire, and I tweak 2 pieces of the code. And it's not code that you wouldn't have done yourself. Mm-hmm. It's just we did it for you.
Right.
Yeah, it's the plumbing.
You would have done this code yourself. You would have called add open telemetry and add these 5 things. We're just making it available to call as a baseline.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool. So personally, what's new? What's coming up for you? What's in your inbox? What's next?
Good question. I've definitely been looking at the AI space a lot. You could imagine inside Microsoft, there's a lot of interest in AI overall.
Yeah.
A lot of interest. And I've been avoiding AI personally for a very long time. But just, you know it exists.
Yeah.
You know there's people doing machine learning and that stuff. But you kind of wait until the way I get involved in stuff is I kind of keep it on the back burner. Mm-hmm. And I wait for signal to kind of exceed some threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And AI is past that point now where I have to know enough about the space to have conversations, to understand how I can integrate with what we're doing. So for me personally, I've been getting involved in just understanding more of the space so I can kind of understand how it affects the next 10 years of .NET. Do we have to be a big player in this space? Is it did Python win it ready? Just those basic things I've been thinking about Yeah. But definitely shipping Aspire is top of my list, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Aspire is going to leave your life anytime soon.
Right?
I'm sure
No, definitely not.
The list of next is huge.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Your burn list runneth over.
And you wouldn't believe historically when you build a new thing, sometimes, this is well known, people wait until version 3 to try it out.
Sure.
The version 1 is not good. And internally, it's really hard to get teams to adopt things sometimes because they want things that are tried and true and done, and only if they already have affordances for it will they take a dependency on it. Mm-hmm. We're seeing people want to use Aspire, they see the benefit of it and they want to get telemetry and they want to get these things. So we're gonna spend some time also trying to figure out what Aspire looks like for inside of the company.
Sure,
yeah.
And hopefully bring some of those learnings back out.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a line from when I one time drinking with Jeff Snover, where he said, when I created PowerShell, they made me a distinguished engineer. But when I got the whole company to use it, they made me a technical fellow.
That's pretty awesome.
That's good. That's great.
That's what I have to do. I got it.
Oh, well, David, it's been a delight talking to you for the last hour. And it's always great talking to you. And Aspire is amazing. What can I say? And I hope everybody will dive in, check out the documentation, and get started. Write something awesome. Thanks again. All right, and we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a